Oh, we are live. I've seen 1, 2, 3. We're live at 11:05. Here we are, Spirit Cars on BC. Josh is the voice of Spirit Cars. He's hiding behind the camera still. We were talking about this 34 yesterday, and we're still still working on it. It was on the jig yesterday. Sean got it off this morning. He turned it over, and we were talking about the front end. You can kind of get a better idea. Upside down, it's a little hard to tell, but we've got the rack on it. It's got the 4-link setup. Got your spindles. It'll have brakes, calipers, and rotors. He's putting those together. We use GM calipers and rotors. It's a 37 to 41 Ford spindle, but this right here, this bearing adapter, there's a bearing adapter that you can press on to have a modern rotor, and the brackets, we use a modern, what is that, it's a Camaro type, GM Camaro.
82 to 87 caliper and a 70 to 78 Camaro rotor.
So, easy part store stuff. So the front end's together on this. Got our motor mounts. This is set up for a 350 or a small block Chevy, which is really the same as a big block Chevy. You just need to be aware, big block's a little wider or longer, so you'll have a little less room for your radiator in the front. I believe it's set up for a 350 turbo transmission. The 400 be back a little bit more, and a 700 be back quite a bit more. Yesterday we talked a little bit about the importance of having a removable trans cross member. If you're going to want to service your car, be aware of those things. This particular car has a power brakes with the booster and everything on it. The pedal will come up, so we've got that located. Again, we know where it goes on a Spirit car, so it's located there, ready to go. So I thought today maybe we'd talk just a little bit about the rear end. You need to have it angled 3 degrees. What you don't want is your drive shaft from the back of your transmission, the pinion, or the yoke, to come straight across with no angle at all right into your differential. If they're just totally parallel with each other, it'll set up vibration and it'll wear. So we want to get about 3, since your motor's going to be set back about 3 degrees, get your angle on your rear end about 3 degrees, and you can set that up. We use again, we do a lot of stuff with jigs here, so we've got this set up for rear ends, and we put the rear end up there, and we've got a couple different jigs for the different brackets that go on, and it bolts on, or there's several different ways to do it. This particular one has got I think I mentioned a little bit, it's a triangulated 4-link. Now if you look at it, there's 2 triangles holding the back of this rear end. So there's no way for this rear end to shift back and forth. If you were using just a straight 4-link, they were going parallel and straight, or if you were using radius rods, we don't have the coilover shocks on it yet, but the coilovers will go here, and they mount to a bracket down here. And the bracket we have is adjustable, so you can move it up or down. And also you can get different lengths of coilovers. But if you weren't using the triangulated rear end, you would have to have a panhard rod, especially in the back, because it would just flop over back and forth on those springs. Now this one, there's several different ways to do the springs. You can do a transverse leaf, which would have, I think there's one sitting right here. This is an old rear end, but you have a transverse leaf will come over, and you'll just have a leaf spring, and then you'll have a separate set of shocks, just regular shocks like what you would like to have on the front here. But we're using coilover shocks, so we don't have them. I wish we had them so I could show you, but they're not on it. The shock and the spring are combined together, and it's adjustable. We use an adjustable one. This is probably going to be a QA1 or Carrera, which would
They're the same company.
Same company. Carrera is kind of their low end. QA1 is the higher end. QA1 bought out Carrera. Those are the two shocks that we use, although there's plenty of other ones that are good. And they're adjustable. You can pretty much crank the spring tighter, and it'll make the spring stiffer. The spring is rated from 150 pounds, 175, 200 pounds, 250, whatever. You can get different spring ratings, so if you want to soften up the ride, you can do it with the spring, and then you have minor adjustments within that on the shock as you tighten it up, and it compresses that spring and it doesn't have as much travel. Something you might want to be aware of on the spring, you can kind of see the angle. You can see from the back here. If my shock is here, the mount, I'm just using this to give an example, and it'll bolt over here. You see the angle here. Now if that spring rating, if it's going straight up and down, that's going to give you your most shock. Now the more you angle that, you're going to lose the resistance of it, and it's not going to have, say it's a 250 pound spring rate, and I put that shock in here at an angle like that, it's not going to be 250 pounds anymore. So there's not an absolute where it needs to be, but I mean, looking at the angle here, I'm not going to say it's trial and error, but just remember, the more you angle your shocks, the less resistance there's going to be in the movement of the spring. So we got our shocks put in, we got our mounts. You can do, there's several different kind of brackets here. Make sure when you weld the rear end, heat, when you put a lot of heat on something, especially rear end, it'll have a tendency to warp the rear end. It'll warp this tube pretty bad. So be careful that you don't just get this superheated in one area and it warps this tube. Make sure you kind of keep it somewhat cool in between. You don't want a cold weld, but that's just something to be aware of. You don't want your tubes warping and putting some stress on your axle and then the bearings, and it'll wear out pretty quick. I'm not sure what I'll tell you today, except here we got our 34 frame. It's coming together. Sometimes it can be bobbed on the back. Sometimes they'll extend past the car, put the tank on the back. Sometimes the tank can go in the car. There's some fuel cells that actually go along the running boards that are pretty nice. I guess again, on the main thing on building a chassis is think the whole car through. Once you get your chassis built, it's really the foundation of everything when it comes to the safety of the car, the handling of the car, the ride of the car, just the overall performance of the car. And clean is good. The cleaner you can keep it, I mean, everything boxed, you don't want no twisting. Get it painted nice. If you're going to take and have your car judged at shows, a judge is going to want to look up under there and want to see it clean. He's going to want it clean and good welds and painted as nice as you can. It's a little bit hard to get up in these areas, but if you can put it on a tall stand and get up and around it, or if you can have it on a rotisserie to turn it as you're painting it, that's a good way to do it too. When you paint a frame, we'll get it to this point. This will go out as a kit, a Spirit kit. I believe it's a super kit for the 34. But when you get your frame and everything's good the way you want it, and you know all the brackets are on, there may be a tab that need to be welded, for the brake. So if you got brake lines coming out here, braided line, or just make sure you got all your brackets on. We'll take and have this sandblasted next. So we'll sandblast it. It can be sanded with a DA sander and scuffed and cleaned up that way, but the best way is to sandblast it. That would just be my advice. Remember to use a self-etching primer. Last thing you want is to get this all painted super slick and have your paint just start flaking off. So put an etching primer down. It doesn't have to be a build primer. You're not going to see a lot of it just so it's shiny, so you don't need to really worry about, you know, the welds are clean. I personally, we won't try to Bondo around these welds. Especially only on our T-buckets in the front of the car, we'll clean them up really nice because you see that. But these welds are all clean. Make sure the BBs are off of it. But paint away, you got a rolling chassis. What we're looking at here is basically, you could say a stock. I mean, at this point, there's nothing custom about it around here anymore. It's built off a jig. There it is. It should be the same every time. Body should fit on it every time. So if you want to go this way, it's easy. You just, here we go, on my 34 frame. Or if you want to get rails or do your own or different options, that's good too. Independent front suspensions, that's all available. A 9-inch has just been a classic, been around. 9 inches that we use here are John's, is it 9-inch or 9-inch factory?
Yep, John's Industries.
John's Industries. They just have a good product. These are all new parts. Put them together. So that's about it today. Not a whole lot of information, but triangulated rear end. There you see what one looks like. This can also be done as radius rods, or it can be done as a 4-link that are just parallel and straight. Coilovers. There you go. Pretty close. So let's go ahead and read from Ernie's Pass It On, Hot Rod Man. So our thought for today is I'm low energy today. O'Donnell, he wouldn't call me low energy, would he? I feel like I'm low energy today. Oh, all right, but it's okay. It's okay, I may be low energy, but if you can smile while shoveling poo, you can master the brown belt of Kung Fu. If you can smile while shoveling poo, you can master the brown belt of Kung Fu. Okay, Ernie, I'll have to ask you about that one next time I see you. Thanks for being with us today. Hopefully you got something out of that. It's a Model 34 frame. I love the car.